bartender smiled. The food smelled incredible, but the service dog wouldn't stop barking. Officer Drew Barlow tried to calm her. She was trained for silence. This had never happened before. Customers brushed it off. Until inspectors opened the truck's back freezer. Inside wasn't spoiled beef or mislabeled pork, but something far worse, something that should never have been served. So what exactly did they find? First, hit that subscribe button and comment below where in the world you're watching from. That being said, let's dive in. The lunch rush hit the town square like clockwork every weekday at noon. Umbrellas popped open, folding chairs scraped against pavement, food truck vents hissed steam into the crisp air. It wasn't a big city, just Pinefield, population under 10,000, but the square transformed into a miniature festival every afternoon. Students from the local college spilled out from campus with backpacks slung over one shoulder. Office workers from the courthouse cut across the lawn in dress shoes, ties loosened against the midday sun, and families, especially on warm days like today, lined up with kids and strollers drawn by the irresistible smells of grilled onions, garlic butter, and fried fish wafting through the air. Salsa Luna was the newest truck in the rotation, but already the most popular by far. Hard to miss with its bright green paint job, Day of the Dead style lettering hand-painted across the sides, salsa music playing just loud enough from a weathered speaker mounted on the roof. Its owner, Ricardo Munoz, had the kind of easy charm that made people trust him instantly. Always wore a red bandana tied around his neck, told terrible dad jokes through the serving window, remembered regulars by name after just one visit. His steak tacos had racked up 5-star reviews on Yelp within days of opening, and nobody ever seemed to notice whether he had a proper license posted anywhere. Officer Drew Barlow wasn't there to inspect food trucks. He was on his first week of halftime duty, walking his usual loop with a slight limp in his right leg and a soft, panting shadow keeping perfect pace beside him. Tilly, a golden retriever with watchful eyes and an orange service dog vest, matched his steps exactly. Her role wasn't about mobility assistance. She was trained for PTSD intervention. She knew when Drew's heart rate spiked without him noticing, when his voice hit a register that he couldn't hear himself. She knew exactly when to lean her weight against his leg, when to nudge him back to the present moment. They'd just passed a Thai noodle cart when Drew caught the unmistakable scent of pork carnitas sizzling on a flat-top grill and realized he hadn't eaten since his hasty breakfast of cold toast. "Let's see what all the fuss is about," he murmured, guiding Tilly toward the Salsa Luna line. They waited about 10 minutes, behind a teenage couple sharing earbuds and a banker scrolling frantically through emails. Tilly sat perfectly still, tail curled neatly over one paw, seemingly content to people watch while they waited. When it was finally Drew's turn at the window, he smiled politely and opened his mouth to order. That's when Tilly froze. She didn't pull her leash, didn't bark wildly or make a scene. She just locked her legs, dropped her tail, and let out a single guttural bark. Sharp, focused, not scared, angry. Drew turned, startled by the sudden change. "Tilly?" She didn't even glance at him. Her eyes were locked on the vendor inside the truck, hackles slightly raised along her back, breathing low and steady. Ricardo leaned out with a practiced grin. "Whoa, hey girl, you okay? Maybe she smells my chihuahua at home, huh?" The line chuckled politely. Drew didn't. Tilly barked again, louder this time, then growled, a sound Drew rarely heard from her. People were staring now, some with phones half raised. Drew knelt beside her. "Tilly, heel." She didn't budge an inch. Ricardo looked more amused than concerned. "Don't worry, man. Dogs hate cilantro sometimes. Makes them crazy." Drew stood, gave a tight nod, and walked away without ordering. Tilly followed, but kept looking over her shoulder until they turned the corner and the truck disappeared from view. It wasn't like her. Not even close. And for the first time in a long while, Drew felt his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt since the academy. Not from fear or anxiety. From instinct. She hadn't barked to protect him. She'd barked to warn him. The thing about Tilly, what made her different from other service dogs Drew had worked with, was her precision. She didn't react to squirrels darting across the park, didn't flinch when garbage trucks backfired, never even blinked at fireworks or the occasional pedestrian who shouted too loud downtown. Her entire training revolved around restraint. So when Drew got home that night and tossed his keys on the counter, he couldn't let it go. He kept replaying the bark in his head. Not startled, not panicked. It was alert, purposeful, like she'd seen something he hadn't. He tried brushing it off at first. Maybe the guy really did have a dog at home. Maybe Tilly had picked up something strange in the air, spices she'd never encountered before, but it didn't sit right with him. Not at all. Out of habit, he flipped open his laptop and searched Salsa Luna Pinefield. Dozens of glowing reviews popped up immediately. Instagram reels of cheese pull shots. College kids filming TikToks of themselves taking first bites. Hashtags like hashtag best tacos in town and hashtag Luna lunch lines dominating local feeds. All charm, no controversy. But one thing stood out. Nowhere, not on Yelp, not on Google, not even in the local permit database, was there a trace of a business license under that name. Drew leaned back, frowning, and clicked through archived food truck rosters. Salsa Luna wasn't listed with the Chamber of Commerce either. Maybe it was just a clerical oversight. Maybe Munoz had registered under a different LLC name. But still, in a town like Pinefield, that kind of detail usually got noticed. The next day, Drew was technically off duty. Still, his morning walk brought him near the square again. Tilly trotted beside him, head high, tail swaying gently. She seemed completely fine. Until they turned the corner. The truck was already parked for the day. Bright green paint gleaming in the morning sun, music playing softly. Ricardo was flipping a spatula behind the open window, chatting with a few early customers. Tilly stopped cold. Drew barely registered the sudden slack in her leash before she let out another low growl. Not loud enough to attract attention, just constant. Her body tensed visibly. She backed up a step. He looked down at her. Tilly? Her eyes were locked on the truck again, unwavering. Her growl deepened. All right, Drew muttered, mostly to himself. I believe you. He scanned the square, looking for someone official. Near the library's front steps, Janelle Grant, the town's senior food safety officer, was sipping coffee and reviewing something on a clipboard. She was technically off duty too, but Drew figured now was as good a time as any. He crossed over to her. Hey, Janelle. She looked up, surprised. Officer Barlow, enjoying your morning? Trying to. Listen, I've got a bit of an odd ask. He explained the whole incident. Tilly's bark yesterday, her growl again today, the missing license records. Grant frowned but didn't dismiss him outright. You know dogs are scent-focused, right? She said thoughtfully. He could have spilled raw meat or tracked in something foul from a supplier. Doesn't mean anything criminal. I know, Drew nodded. But you've met Tilly before. She doesn't react like this. Not even when a guy in a ski mask walked into the bank last year. Grant exhaled slowly. All right, I'll take a look, but unofficially. They walked together toward the truck. Ricardo smiled broadly when he saw them approaching. Back again, huh? This time bringing company? Grant flashed her badge casually. Health inspection, just a routine spot check. Got a minute? His smile faltered slightly. Now? Kind of busy with the morning rush. Then we won't take long. He hesitated, then stepped aside reluctantly, gesturing them in. Tilly stayed outside, watching the truck like it might drive off at any second. As Grant climbed into the narrow galley, Drew looked down at his dog. You saw something, he whispered. She didn't blink, didn't sit. She just stared at the truck, still as a photograph. The moment Janelle Grant stepped into the truck, her nose twitched involuntarily. Not foul exactly, but definitely off, like grease that had been reused too many times, or produce that had sat out in humid air a bit too long. She'd done enough surprise inspections to know when something was masking something else. Sorry about the mess, Ricardo called from the grill, where sizzling meat hissed on the flat top. Didn't think I'd have visitors so early. Just need a quick look at your storage and prep areas, Grant replied evenly. Won't be long. She ducked slightly beneath a hanging string of plastic chili lights and began her methodical walkthrough. First the prep counters, sticky, a little cluttered, but nothing egregious. Cutting boards stacked under a pile of paper towels, oil-stained aprons draped near the hand sink, a bottle of sanitizer still sealed and unopened. Her pen scratched across her clipboard. "Where's your main refrigeration unit?" she asked. Ricardo pointed to a chest-style cooler tucked beneath the rear prep table. "There. Got another fridge, too. Back corner." She crouched and opened the cooler first. Ice packs, sealed bags of veggies, a tub of sour cream resting dangerously close to room temperature. "Need a thermometer?" she asked dryly. "Nah, it's usually fine." Grant moved to the upright fridge, opened the door, and stopped. Inside, a pile of meat, wrapped in unsealed plastic, sat in a pool of reddish liquid. Some pieces looked gray around the edges, no labels, no dates. The odor wasn't just unpleasant, it was metallic, gamey. "What cuts are these?" she asked, keeping her voice professional. Ricardo scratched the back of his neck. "Mostly pork, some goat, specialty stuff. I buy local." Grant narrowed her eyes. "Where's the packaging?" "Guy I get it from does bulk deliveries, rural farms, off the books, but clean, I promise you." She took a step back, glanced at the freezer bolted beneath the rear counter. "This locked?" Ricardo hesitated visibly. "It's for private stock. I bring some stuff from home, family recipes." "I need to see it." "It's not for sale." "Then you've got nothing to hide." Ricardo didn't move, just held her gaze. Then, slowly, he pulled a ring of keys from his pocket and unlocked the freezer. Grant opened it. A second later, she dropped the lid with a gasp. Then she turned sharply toward the truck window and shouted, "Officer Barlow, I need you in here!" Drew climbed aboard instantly, hand already near his badge. "What is it?" She opened the freezer again, slowly this time, letting him see. There were 3 slabs of what looked like partially thawed meat, bones still attached. But it wasn't beef. Or pork. The bones were too thin, the muscle too stringy. One chunk had fur still attached. Tilly, still outside the truck, let out a sudden bark, loud, piercing, and for the first time since she'd met her, Grant saw the dog jump up on the truck step and plant her paws against the window, her eyes locked directly on Ricardo. "Step out of the truck," Drew said, voice low and even. Ricardo threw up his hands. "This is crazy. That's game meat. I've got paperwork." "Then show it." He didn't move. Grant looked down at the freezer again. One of the pieces wasn't frozen solid. It bent slightly when she nudged it with her pen. She turned to Ricardo. "This isn't goat or chicken, and I doubt it's pig. I want a lawyer." "You'll get one," Drew said, stepping toward him. "But you're not serving another taco today." Tilly was still growling now, slow and even, the way only a dog does when something is deeply, deeply wrong. Grant pulled out her phone and dialed. "This is Officer Grant, Food Unit 6. I'm issuing an immediate cease operations on vendor Salsa Luna. I need backup, Department of Health response, and I'm requesting law enforcement presence. This is now a criminal matter." Ricardo didn't say another word, but his face turned cold, empty, like the mask had slipped off completely. And outside, Tilly stood like a statue, watching him. Like she'd known all along what he was hiding. 2 days later, the first set of test results came in. Grant had driven up to Drew's place herself, paperwork in hand, jaw locked tight. "It's not just bad hygiene," she said, handing him the folder. "They ran DNA on the samples from the freezer. 1 tested positive for raccoon. 2 had traces of feline." Drew didn't speak for a long time. "You mean stray cats," she finished. "Confirmed. Partial match to one that went missing 3 weeks ago near Oak Ridge." Tilly sat at Drew's feet, head tilted slightly, as if listening to the conversation. She hadn't barked once that day, but she hadn't left Drew's side either, not even to eat her breakfast. The next day, the sheriff's office filed a criminal complaint. Health violations quickly became cruelty charges, then they became something darker. Grant contacted the Department of Agriculture. The state's veterinary toxicology lab ran a broader panel, and the findings only got worse. Inside one of the unmarked containers, fur clumps, some with collar fragments still attached. Not large dogs, not wolves, domestic animals, probably stolen from the area. A deputy cross-referenced local missing pet reports, 7 in the last 2 months alone, all from the south side of town, mostly cats, a few small dogs. Ricardo Munoz hadn't just bent the rules, he'd erased them, and no one had noticed, except for a service dog who wasn't even on duty. He's done this before, Grant said during the Joint Task Force meeting. Under a different truck name each time. Salsa Luna, Tio's Grill, La Roja. Each one shut down, Drew asked. Eventually, but quietly, minor infractions, nothing that got him flagged statewide, until now. She flipped open a document. Inside, inspection reports from 2 counties over. Similar issues, complaints of strange meat, one anonymous tip about a weird taste that was never properly followed up. The state attorney's office began preparing charges: animal cruelty, misrepresentation of food, violation of consumer safety codes, potentially interstate fraud if they could prove any ingredient had crossed state lines illegally. Meanwhile, local animal control launched a separate investigation. One officer, Shauna Park, reviewed neighborhood surveillance footage near Ricardo's known prep sites. On one grainy clip, he's seen crouched beside a trash bin at 2 a.m., holding what looks like a small carrier crate. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone thought it. He wasn't just sourcing meat. He was hunting it. Back at Drew's house, Tilly was different. She wasn't pacing anymore, but she watched. Every window, every car that rolled past the driveway. She's still on edge, Drew told Grant over the phone. Like she's waiting for something. That dog knew before we did, Grant replied. She saw through his act from the beginning. The sheriff's office tried to bring Ricardo back in for questioning, but it was too late. His listed address had been vacated, his phone disconnected, his social media accounts wiped clean. It was like he knew exactly what was coming. Tilly barked at the mailbox the next morning. Just once, sharp and clear. Drew went out to check it. Inside was a scrap of paper, no envelope, just 2 words written in crooked, oily pen. Nice try. He took it straight to the station. That's him, Drew said. He's watching us. The lead investigator nodded grimly. We'll find him. He doesn't know what we're holding back yet. And they were holding something back. From the initial freezer inventory, one of the samples had been bagged separately. Tissue that didn't match the others. A shoulder cut, partially trimmed, wrapped with actual butcher paper, and sealed more carefully than the rest. It had been sent for deeper testing because it wasn't raccoon, cat, or dog. It didn't match any known animal on record. It was synthetic. You're saying it was fake? Drew asked, confused. Engineered, the lab rep corrected. Lab grown, likely cultured off tissue, not from an animal at all. Why would he have that? No idea, but it means he had access to something more organized than we thought. That opened a whole new thread of investigation. Had Ricardo been working alone all this time? The working theory became twofold. Either he was covering up his real supplier, or he was testing a product for someone else, under the guise of food truck fare, where oversight was weakest. But the only solid lead they truly had was Tilly. She's not just a dog, Grant said quietly. She's a sensor for things we forget to see. The sheriff nodded. Then we better listen to what she's telling us. That night, Tilly slept at the foot of Drew's bed. For the first time in days, her tail wagged gently in her sleep. And somewhere, in a kitchen no one had found yet, a man was reloading his cooler, thinking the dog had been silenced. He was wrong. Ricardo Munoz wasn't hard to catch the first time, but the second time, it felt like he'd vanished into thin air. After he was released pending further evidence, the man simply didn't return home. No official residence, no payroll trail, no lease under his name. The truck had been towed, the equipment impounded, but Ricardo himself had gone completely silent, until Tilly started barking at nothing again. It was 3 days after the food truck raid. Drew had been trying to enjoy a rare quiet night. TV muted, house dark, a cool breeze slipping through the kitchen screen. Tilly had seemed calmer earlier, slept most of the day, but now, near midnight, she stood at the back door, staring intently into the woods behind the house. Her tail wasn't wagging, Her ears were up, silent, focused. Then she let out a short bark, just one. Drew sat up immediately. "What is it, girl?" She barked again, then took off like a shot. Drew didn't stop to think. He grabbed his flashlight, his sidearm, and his badge. By the time he caught up to her, she was already halfway through the woods, her head low, weaving between the trees like she was following a scent only she could detect. What they found less than a mile in made Drew's stomach turn. It wasn't much, just a shabby shack, built from scrap tin and plywood, hidden behind a collapsed cedar. It looked abandoned at first glance. But the smell? That was fresh. Drew circled wide. Tilly crouched low, tense but not aggressive. She stayed behind cover, like she'd done this 100 times before. Drew approached the shack, slowly, flashlight off. Through a crack in the wall, he saw movement. Just a silhouette, hunched and busy, like someone chopping vegetables. He radioed in quietly. "Possible 10:20 on Ricardo Munoz. Request backup at Hollow Creek Woods, near mile marker 3. Shack's occupied. I'm on foot." Then he drew his weapon. He stepped forward carefully. The door was slightly ajar. Inside was worse than he could have imagined. There was a makeshift prep table, blood-stained gloves, cutting tools still wet with something dark. A cooler filled with vacuum-sealed meat packs sat in the corner, half loaded into a new portable cart. And standing over the counter, sleeves rolled up, eyes wild, was Ricardo. He looked up like he'd been caught stealing candy. "You again," he said flatly. Drew kept his voice level. "Step away from the table." Ricardo didn't move an inch. I said, "Step away." That's when Tilly came through the door. She didn't bark, didn't charge, just placed herself between the cooler and the man, head low, growling steadily. Ricardo glanced at her, then back at Drew. "She's the one who started all this." "You did this," Drew replied. She just noticed. Backup arrived 3 minutes later. Ricardo didn't resist. Let them cuff him without struggle. Kept muttering about how they were watching anyway, and this town's full of hypocrites. Inside the shack, officers cataloged everything methodically. Gloves, bones, sealed trays labeled with vague codes, a half-written list of park names and dates, possible drop locations. One of the bags had a faint smudge on it. Forensics would later lift a partial fingerprint. Outside, Tilly sat beside the patrol car quietly, eyes fixed on the dark woods. Drew knelt beside her and scratched behind her ear. "You found him," he whispered. "Again." She leaned her head into his palm. Later, the department would issue a short press release. Local vendor taken into custody after evidence tied him to illegal food preparation and distribution. Investigation ongoing. No mention of Tilly. No front page story. Just a line in a paragraph. But in the neighborhood that night, word spread like wildfire. The vendor, everyone thought they knew, wasn't just cutting corners. He was cutting through rules no one thought could be broken. And it wasn't a badge, or a gun, or a report that exposed him. It was a dog with a sense for truth. The trial was quiet, almost too quiet for what it could have become. There were no national headlines, no courtroom sketches, no massive press turnout, just a few local journalists, some confused neighbors, and a slow parade of evidence that painted a picture nobody in town wanted to believe. Ricardo Munoz, according to testimony and digital records, had been operating under 3 different business names across 2 states. Salsa Luna was only the latest. Each of his food trucks had quietly shut down after vague health violations or temporary suspensions. Nothing criminal had ever stuck, until now. The forensic reports confirmed what everyone feared. The vacuum-sealed meat packages weren't just raccoon and squirrel. At least one of them contained feline DNA, domestic. One matched the missing calico from Elm Street, the one with the hand-painted "Have you seen Daisy?" signs posted on telephone poles 2 weeks earlier. Another matched a neighborhood tabby named Moxie. The prosecution laid out the story with painful clarity. Ricardo had been sourcing meat from illegal backyard sources, roadkill, feral animals, possibly even stolen pets. He blended them with conventional ingredients, disguised them under aggressive seasoning, and sold them as tacos and skewers to half the town. And no one suspected a thing. No one, except a retired service dog. Tilly's testimony wasn't verbal, of course, but Drew was called to the stand. He spoke plainly, didn't dramatize, just explained her behavior, how she'd never barked like that before, how she'd refused to move, and how her alert had triggered the inspection that uncovered everything. "She's not just my service dog," he said. "She's a part of my perception. If she reacts to someone, I pay attention." This time I did. The defense tried to play it down, called it coincidence when suggested Tilly had reacted to the smell of cooked meat. Drew's answer was firm. She barked before anything was served. Before the window even opened, she wasn't reacting to the food, she was reacting to the man. Ricardo showed no remorse. In court, he stared blankly at the floor most days. On the final day, he told the judge, "I didn't hurt anyone. They ate it. They liked it." The judge didn't flinch. Ricardo was sentenced to 5 years for fraud, distribution of uninspected meat, and animal cruelty. A lighter sentence than many wanted, but at least it stuck. His food license was revoked permanently. Civil suits were already piling up. Several pet owners filed claims. One of them left a photo of her cat, Daisy, on the courthouse steps the day of sentencing. "She was part of our family," it read in marker. "I wish I'd listened when the dog barked near his truck." The health department made swift changes. Mobile food vendors were now subject to surprise inspections every 60 days, with stricter guidelines on meat sourcing. Officers received a new training module titled Nonverbal Alerts and Unusual Behavior in Animals. Tilly's name didn't appear in any of the memos, but people remembered. They remembered the way she'd stood her ground. They remembered the bark. Drew got calls from reporters wanting quotes. Animal advocacy groups asked for interviews. He declined them all. "She's not a headline," he told one editor. "She's just Tilly." Back home, life went back to normal. Mostly. The town square was quieter. A few food trucks returned eventually, with clear menus and paper licenses taped to their windows. Tilly? She napped on the porch again, barked at the mailman out of habit, carried her rope toy from room to room like it was precious treasure. Sometimes, when Drew walked her through town, people would stop and smile. Kids would wave. One older woman clutched her purse tight and whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart," when they passed. Tilly just wagged her tail and trotted on. There were no medals, no ribbon ceremonies, no bronze paw prints in the sidewalk, but in the minds of a small town that nearly ate its way into scandal, she was more than just a dog. She was the reason they looked twice at what they'd trusted blindly, and she was the reason no one would ever laugh off a bark again. Do you think Tilly actually knew what was in that truck? Or was she picking up on something else, something we'll never really understand? And have you ever seen a dog act strange around someone, only to realize later they were right to be suspicious? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you think. And if this story got you thinking, even for a second, go ahead and give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss tomorrow's video. Share this with someone who still thinks service dogs are just emotional support fluff. They might look at them differently after this. And hey, 2 more stories are already on your screen. Go ahead and click one, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with a brand new story.